One of the reasons, the main reasons we do what we do is to hold government and government officials accountable, to keep watch over taxpayer dollars and to make sure they're spent well. Our Action News Jax investigation reveals how one of the highest paying public jobs in the city comes with big perks and big spending. If you live in Duval County, you pay the CEO of the Jacksonville Transportation Authority. He makes more than $500,000 and travels across the world on JTA's dime. So I pulled the records and found it's happening while the agency's ridership dwindles and promises for promptness fall short. Meet Nat Ford, the CEO of the city's Transportation Authority. He's in charge of buses, the ever unpopular Skyway, and St. John's River Ferry. But when it comes to doing business, records show the executive rarely, if ever, uses any of them. But he is a frequent flyer. And while Ford jet sets, an Action News Jax investigation found that locals are using public transportation less and less often, too. We pulled the numbers. According to the American Public Transportation Association, ridership is down almost half since the pandemic. And JTA's numbers show the agency sometimes fails to meet its own on-time standards. And while ridership dwindles, Action News Jax found the man in charge is often missing too. We pulled Ford's travel records. Since 2016, Action News Jax Investigates found Ford took 140 trips on the public dollar. He's spent more than $40,000 just on D.C. travel alone. And he doesn't only jet set to domestic locales. He's stamped his passport at least a dozen times, hitting Berlin, Barcelona, and London just this year. All those miles add up to more than $189,000, a bill footed by you, the taxpayer.
I'm Nat Ford.
We asked Ford for a sit-down interview to talk about his travel. He declined, so we caught up with him at a press conference. We want to talk to you about your travel. Can you explain why you're out of town so frequently?
Well, I don't know if so frequently is the way to describe it.
But not counting personal vacation or holidays, we found Ford is out of town an average of twice a month for multiple days each time. Records show most of the travel is to conferences, the rest somehow transit related. Even a JTA spokesperson says the Conference of Mayors or the sister city's delegation to Johannesburg, South Africa.
I'm a high energy individual, so in addition to the travel and I'd say the national associations I'm leading, I'm sitting at the table with those decision makers and those influencers that are making policy decisions around transportation. And
we found he is being paid well to do that. In addition to his $189,000 travel tab, Ford makes almost $460,000 a year. That's more than President Joe Biden makes, and significantly more than the top transportation executives in Chicago and New York City make, two of the largest public transit systems in the U.S. And that doesn't even include his upcoming yearly bonus of almost $92,000, or his annual cost of living adjustment set to be at least $13,000 on top of that, or his $50,000 a year deferred compensation, or his $1,000 a month allowance for his personal vehicle.
I'm doing everything within my power, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to support the citizens in this community, and that record is pretty clear and evident.
Except with ridership down, questionable on-time rates, and more than generous spending on executive travel, we still had questions, and Ford didn't want to answer them. The Emerald Trail Community Service. No, well, I mean, this is important. This is important, though.
But I think I've got other.
But ridership is down. Ridership has not recovered from the pandemic.
Ford, I'm going to take additional questions if you have to me. You have to let these other gentlemen have their time. We don't have a limited amount of time.
And that is where our interview ended. I've been digging into JTA since June, but over the weekend, the agency came back with data saying that ridership this year is about 12% higher than last year, and that's true. Last year was down almost 47% from pre-pandemic numbers. This year, it's only down 43%. In the meantime, Mr. Ford's contract states that he, quote, shall perform his duties primarily in Jacksonville. But so far this year, he's taken 20 trips out of town. So considering his busy travel schedule, we wanted to know how often he's actually in the office. So last Monday, we requested his badge access history for this year. We're still waiting on that. But coming up next, we'll address Mr. Ford's claim that his travel is to lobby for JTA. So tomorrow at 6 p.m., I'll look into the ethics and the potential redundant spending associated with that. Tonight, Action News Jax is raising questions about ethics and spending at the Jacksonville Transportation Authority. Last night, we told you about how the CEO of the agency makes more than $600,000 a year and travels all over the world on the public's dime, all while ridership dwindles and on-time rates are questionable. Now, our continuing investigation pokes holes in the reason for some of that travel.
We're in a very competitive environment when it comes to federal infrastructure dollars. This is probably the most competitive environment we've been in decades.
That's the reason JTA's CEO Nat Ford gave when Action News Jax pressed him on his travel itinerary. Since 2016, we found he has taken 140 trips on the public's dollar all over the world. The travel tab tallies up to at least $189,000, but he says that's money spent in pursuit of more money.
That travel is related to the dollars that actually come here, creating jobs through our infrastructure projects.
And how does he describe his role in that process?
I'm the #1 lobbyist for the JTA.
But in a strict sense of the word lobbyist, that's impossible. We checked and found he's not a registered lobbyist on the state or federal levels. Heather Ferguson with the federal watchdog group Common Cause says you must be registered to lobby or risk violating the Lobbying Disclosure Act of 1995.
If this individual is lobbying directly to members of Congress or to their state legislature, that they should be not only registering, but also ensuring that they are filing their reports as to how much they have been spending in their lobbying efforts.
We couldn't find any on the Lobbying Disclosure's website. But when I asked Ford about not being a registered lobbyist, he was very clear that's what he's doing.
It's one thing to see a lobbyist. It's another thing to see the #1 principle for an organization be part of that effort.
It's double the effort at more than double the cost to the taxpayer, though. While Ford's travel this year totals nearly $41,000, we found his agency is simultaneously paying not one, not two, but 3 lobbying firms more than $250,000. The Senate Office of Public Records shows JTA has paid the firm Holland & Knight $90,000 so far this year for lobbying at the federal level. City records show it can also pay Ballard Partners up to $10,000 a month for state lobbying. And for local projects, the contract earmarks $78,000 a year for the Southern Group. So we asked JTA to show us how all that money is paying off. According to its own records, that $288,000 has gotten about $6.6 million at the federal level this year. 0 from the state and 0 at the local level, which raises questions about the way at least $190,000 are being spent.
When there are suspicions raised or when the perception by the public is that lobbyists or other individuals are having an outsized voice to their individual voice for what matters most to their community, the public trust continues to erode.
Ford's pursuit of federal dollars continues. Just last week, he's pictured here with Mayor Donna Deegan saying, quote, check out these Jacksonville leaders as they travel to D.C. to work toward bringing in federal grant dollars to the city. According to JTA's own records, this is Ford's 5th trip to the nation's capital just this year. Tonight, Action News Jax has answers about just how much time the city's top transportation executive spends in the office. We've been working on our investigation into the Jacksonville Transportation Authority for months, and our requests included the CEO's badge swipes into his office. According to internal documents, JTA legal counsel tried to prevent us from getting these records, but thanks to Florida's public records law, we prevailed. We've already told you how often Nat Ford is on the road for work, and now our continuing coverage shows how much time he's actually putting in at the office. Employees swipe a badge to get into and around the building for work in many places, but it's also a way to monitor attendance. And for this story, it's a way for taxpayers to track how their money is spent.
I'm Nat Ford.
After discovering how frequently JTA CEO Nat Ford travels, we requested badge access data for his office for the first 6 months of the year. It paints a very clear picture of a man who's often missing in action, at least on the local level. We'll break it down for you. There are 125 working days inside the time frame we requested, but Mr. Ford's badge only shows up in 65 of them. Public records show he was traveling on at least 6 of those days, only leaving 59 for a full day at the office. The rest of the calendar is almost entirely filled with travel. Records show Ford was out of town on taxpayer-funded trips 59 days in that same time period, including a 14-day trip to Spain and a 5-day stay in Hawaii. JTA's own records show he's traveling just as much as he's at the office.
When you're gone and out of town that much, do you feel like you can really do a good job with the agency here?
He didn't directly answer that question, but eventually said this as an explanation.
I'm a high energy individual, so in addition to the travel and I'd say the national associations I'm leading, I'm sitting at the table with those decision makers and those influencers that are making policy decisions around transportation.
That comes with a total compensation of $626,475. And on top of that, an almost $41,000 travel tab just this year so far. And now we've asked each member of the JTA board for an interview regarding their oversight of Mr. Ford and his travel and his spending. But after initially agreeing to a board member interview last Thursday, the agency then canceled with no explanation and no future reschedule date.